In the heart of Birmingham, Alabama, lived Henry Walker, a 68-year-old black man. His skin was deeply lined with age, his eyes a blend of kindness and sorrow, and his hands bore the calluses of decades spent farming, fixing, and caring for others. Despite the hardships, he carried a quiet dignity that refused to bend, even as life knocked him down time and again. Henry had once owned a modest farm on the outskirts of town. He and his late wife, Gloria, had worked it tirelessly, raising livestock, tending crops, and providing for the community. But what truly defined Henry wasn't the farm. It was his heart. When Michael, a 6-year-old white boy, was abandoned by his biological family, Henry and Gloria had taken him in without a second thought. They gave him clothes, food, a bed, and most importantly, love. Henry often remembered the fear in Michael's eyes. The day he arrived, the little boy clinging to a thin blanket like it was a lifeline. Gloria had whispered softly, "Henry, we'll give him love. That's all he needs." Years passed. Michael grew up strong, smart, and ambitious. But along with success came a growing distance from the man who had saved his life. Now, decades later, Henry's life was a shadow of its former self. His small house creaked with every gust of wind, the roof leaked whenever it rained, and the pantry stayed half empty, forcing him to rely on the charity of neighbors. On one chilly morning, Henry walked down the cracked sidewalk with a grocery bag in hand, hoping that Mrs. Callahan, an elderly widow down the street, might have something for him to eat. As he walked, local kids whispered cruel things behind their hands. "There goes the old man, begging again," one said. "His son's rich now." "Guess he don't care about him no more," said another. Henry's stomach sank, but he ignored them. Pride ran through his veins as deeply as blood, and he refused to let mockery dictate his dignity. At Mrs. Callahan's door, Henry knocked lightly. She opened, smiling faintly, already knowing what he'd ask. "Morning, Henry," she said. "I don't have much, but there's enough for a plate." Henry's eyes glistened with gratitude. "Thank you, ma'am." "You've always been kind. Even in this small moment, the weight of years spent abandoned and forgotten bore down on him." Meanwhile, hundreds of miles away in New York City, Michael Walker lived a life of wealth and power. He was the face of a tech empire worth billions, appearing on magazine covers, attending exclusive galas, and rubbing elbows with celebrities and business moguls. But behind the glittering lifestyle was a buried secret. Michael had cut ties with Henry and Gloria. He had rewritten his own history to fit a world where race and image mattered more than love and gratitude. Every time Michael spoke about his past, he painted a story of hardship, struggle, and self-made success, carefully leaving out the man who had raised him. He told investors and socialites, "I had no real family growing up. I built myself from nothing." Each word was a betrayal, each sentence a scar on Henry's heart that Michael would never know. Back in Birmingham, Henry walked past the now empty schoolyard where he once played with Michael. The swings swayed in the wind, squeaking softly, almost as if whispering reminders of a past life. Henry remembered the boy he once held close, reading him bedtime stories, patching his scraped knees, and celebrating every small victory. But the town had moved on. Neighbors assumed Henry was alone by choice, a relic of a past generation. Some whispered racial slurs under their breath. Some treated him with polite indifference, and some simply ignored him. Even grocery clerks and delivery drivers treated him differently. asking him questions that implied judgment. "Isn't your son rich now? How come you're still living like this?" Henry said nothing. He simply nodded, carried his groceries home, and locked the door behind him. Pride and sorrow waged war inside him every single day. Every night, Henry sat in his worn armchair, staring at the faded photographs on the wall. Himself, Gloria, and a young Michael with bright eyes and untamed hair. Gloria had passed years ago, leaving Henry alone with memories and regrets. He prayed quietly, not for wealth or recognition, but for Michael's safety and happiness. And yet, every silent prayer carried an ache, a desperate hope that the boy he loved would remember the man who had saved him. He thought of the injustice, not just of abandonment, but of the subtle, insidious racism that had shaped his life. To the world, he was invisible. To Michael, he was expendable. And to the kids in his neighborhood, he was a cautionary tale of the black man who raised a white boy that now refused to acknowledge him. Henry's hands trembled slightly as he clasped them together. He knew, deep in his soul, that life had a way of surprising those who abandoned love. And though he didn't know when or how, he felt a quiet certainty. Michael's choices would eventually come back to him. Henry Walker, the man who had given his entire heart to a child not his own, now faced the cold world alone. Every step he took, every knock on a neighbor's door, every whispered insult felt like 1,000 tiny betrayals. Yet, beneath the sorrow, beneath the poverty and humiliation, lay an unbroken spirit. A man who had endured neglect, racism, and abandonment still believed in justice, in love, in the unseen threads that tie the past to the future. And somewhere, far away in a towering glass building in New York, Michael Walker, billionaire, successful, arrogant, would one day see the man he had forsaken. And when he did, the world would never be the same. Years had passed since Michael had abandoned his adoptive father, Henry. His tech empire had grown into a multi-billion-dollar enterprise, his name recognized worldwide. Yet the emptiness in his personal life grew heavier with every award, every deal, every gala. Success felt hollow when he thought of the man who had once been his only family. One crisp autumn morning, Michael decided to return to Birmingham, though not out of guilt, at least not entirely. He told himself it was curiosity, a desire to see the old farm again. But deep down, he couldn't deny that he wanted closure, or maybe revenge. He arrived in a sleek black SUV, the kind that made heads turn, a stark contrast to the dusty roads and creaking wooden fences of his childhood. The town barely recognized him. The same kids who once mocked Henry now stared in awe at the billionaire's arrival. Henry, meanwhile, was unaware that his son was back. He was tending his small vegetable patch, his hands worn and soil-stained, when a car engine's roar caught his attention. Looking up, he saw the shiny SUV idling near the edge of his property. Michael stepped out of the vehicle, dressed in an expensive tailored suit, sunglasses reflecting the morning sun. He paused for a moment, looking at the farmhouse, the overgrown fields, the peeling paint. It was everything he remembered, yet everything had aged, just like him. Henry approached cautiously, wiping sweat from his brow, unsure if the man before him was the same boy he had raised. Recognition sparked in his eyes, followed immediately by a blend of hope and fear. Michael called out softly, "Dad?" Henry froze. His heart skipped a beat. For a long, silent moment, he simply stared, emotions twisting inside him, shock, disbelief, pain, and a thread of joy. The reunion was tense. Henry's pride made him hold back tears, while Michael's guilt made him falter. He could have approached with love, but a darker part of him considered testing his father's loyalty to see if the man who had been abandoned would still bend or break. Michael didn't just come to visit. He had a plan. In his mind, this visit was both a test and a subtle retribution. He watched Henry move around the farm, saw the way neighbors treated him, and a cold thrill ran through him. Yet, as Michael surveyed the land, he noticed something Henry had never shared. The old farmhouse still held hidden assets. Unbeknownst to Henry, decades earlier, Gloria had kept meticulous records of small savings, forgotten stocks, and land deeds. Small investments, seemingly insignificant, had grown quietly into a fortune. Michael's eyes widened. Suddenly, this visit was no longer about testing his father. It was about discovery. He realized that while he had built an empire, the man he once disdained had quietly amassed something extraordinary, hidden in plain sight. Henry remained unaware of the fortune. He thought Michael's visit might end in confrontation or ridicule. The tension between them was palpable. Every word Michael spoke, every glance he gave, carried layers of unspoken history. The love once given, the betrayal, the pain, the unacknowledged sacrifices. Michael, standing in the same farmhouse where he had once played as a child, felt a pang of guilt. The boy he had been, innocent, dependent, full of trust, looked at his father with wide, unguarded eyes. But the man he had become was calculating, aware of the power imbalance now resting in his hands. Henry finally spoke, his voice trembling yet strong. "Michael, you're home." The simple word struck Michael harder than any financial revelation. For the first time in years, he felt vulnerable, stripped of arrogance. The weight of abandonment, the guilt he had ignored, the quiet strength of the man before him. It all collided inside him. That evening, as Henry prepared dinner on the old stove, Michael wandered through the house, exploring rooms he had once known. He noticed a hidden safe behind a loose panel in the study. Inside were stacks of documents, certificates, and deeds, assets that Henry had accumulated without ever telling a soul. Michael realized the magnitude. It wasn't billions, but close. Millions in property, stocks, and investments, quietly secured over decades. Henry had lived humbly, never seeking recognition, while Michael had flaunted wealth and power, forgetting the man who had given him life and love. This discovery changed everything. Michael's perception of his father and of himself shifted. The boy who abandoned Henry had returned to find that the father he once dismissed was now quietly richer and wiser than he had imagined. Michael faced a choice. He could reveal the discovery, take advantage of his father's ignorance, or he could reconcile, show gratitude, and repair the broken bond. His pride warred with his conscience. Meanwhile, Henry, unaware of the fortune, continued his simple evening routine, chopping vegetables, humming a tune, and reflecting on the years of hardship. Every bruise, every insult, every neglect had built him into a man who could survive alone, yet his heart still longed for his son's love. The night ended with a silent understanding between father and son, words unspoken, but hearts aware. Michael knew the true test wasn't money or power. It was love, forgiveness, and acknowledgement. And Henry, as always, was ready, even if his son wasn't. Michael's return had begun as a test, a subtle game of observation and judgment. But what he found was far beyond his expectations. The boy who had abandoned his father was confronted with the quiet strength, wisdom, and hidden fortune of the man he had once scorned. Henry Walker, humble, resilient, and dignified, had lived through abandonment, racism, and societal indifference, and yet he had built a life of quiet triumph. The hidden fortune, while remarkable, was secondary to the moral victory. Love and loyalty had endured where betrayal once seemed to rule. Michael now stood at a crossroads. He could continue as the estranged son, or he could honor the father who had raised him with unwavering love. The choice would determine not only their futures, but the legacy of a family shaped by race, abandonment, and resilience. The next morning, Michael sat in the old farmhouse kitchen, the sunlight filtering through dusty curtains. Henry was preparing breakfast, moving with slow, deliberate care. The air was thick with unspoken emotions. Every creak of the wooden floorboards reminded Michael of the years lost, the missed birthdays, the abandoned holidays. He knew that revealing the hidden fortune would shake the foundations of their relationship. Yet, he also felt a burning need to confront the past, to measure Henry's character against his own ambition. Henry, unaware that his secret had been discovered, chatted lightly about the town, neighbors, and the weather. But Michael noticed subtle hints of sadness in his father's eyes, signs of years of struggle, marginalization, and the silent pain of raising a son who had turned away. Michael walked through the farmhouse again, touching the worn wooden panels, the faded photographs on the wall, the old rocking chair by the fireplace. Memories surged. Childhood games, shared stories, nights of fear and comfort. He realized the magnitude of what he had, the chance to right past wrongs, to honor the man who had endured hardship without complaint, and to learn humility. But pride whispered in his ear, tempting him to use this hidden wealth as leverage to test Henry's loyalty. The struggle within him was intense. Part of him wanted revenge, part wanted reconciliation, part wanted to claim what he felt was long overdue. Later that day, Michael finally sat across from Henry, the weight of years pressing down. He took a deep breath and spoke about his journey, the empire he had built, and the emptiness that haunted him. Henry listened quietly, his face unreadable, but his eyes reflecting years of endurance. Michael revealed he knew about the hidden fortune, the small investments, the quiet deeds, the property Henry had accumulated while living modestly. Henry's hands shook slightly as he reached for the old coffee mug, a small, human response to a revelation he hadn't anticipated. The tension between them was palpable. Michael expected anger, perhaps resentment, maybe even tears of betrayal. But Henry surprised him. He smiled faintly, acknowledging the discovery with grace rather than bitterness. Michael realized that wealth was meaningless without the bond he had lost. He saw the courage in Henry's endurance, the dignity in his simplicity, and the love that had never wavered. For the first time, he truly understood the sacrifices his father had made and the weight of systemic racism and social indifference Henry had endured. Henry's voice, calm and steady, broke the tension. He reminded Michael that love and family were more important than money or status. The billionaire, humbled and emotional, recognized that his father had already won in ways that money could never quantify. Word of Michael's return and his father's quiet triumph spread through the town. Neighbors who had once pitied or ignored Henry now came to offer support, respect, and acknowledgement. They marveled at the hidden wealth and, more importantly, at the character of the man who had endured so much. Michael took action, ensuring that Henry's legacy extended beyond the farmhouse. He used part of the hidden fortune to improve the town: scholarships for underprivileged children, community centers, and programs celebrating resilience, dignity, and racial equality. Michael and Henry sat on the porch one evening, watching the sun set over the fields. Silence enveloped them, not awkward, but peaceful. The wounds of the past still existed, but they had been acknowledged, faced, and healed through understanding and love. Michael reached for his father's hand, an unspoken apology, a silent vow to honor him. Henry squeezed it back, forgiveness shining in his eyes. The billionaire son had returned not to reclaim control, but to reconcile, realizing that the true wealth of life lay in love, loyalty, and dignity. Henry's quiet fortune became a beacon for the community, inspiring those who had faced adversity, discrimination, or abandonment. Michael learned that even immense wealth could not replace the human values his father embodied. The story concluded with a powerful truth. Life is measured not by money or status, but by the love, dignity, and resilience we leave behind. Michael and Henry, once separated by ambition and misunderstanding, now stood united. Proof that forgiveness and recognition of true character could overcome years of betrayal and the silent wounds of racial injustice. Michael's return had been a journey through guilt, discovery, and revelation. He discovered not just wealth, but the enduring spirit of a father who had survived neglect, societal racism, and abandonment. The hidden fortune was secondary to the lessons learned: humility, forgiveness, and the power of love. Henry Walker had taught his son the most valuable lesson of all: that dignity cannot be bought, loyalty cannot be forced, and love, when genuine, always survives betrayal. In the end, the once estranged father and son forged a bond stronger than money or status, creating a legacy that would inspire generations, proving that triumph over adversity and racism could exist quietly, powerfully, and permanently.